Nathan Cole was a man who had everything, or so it seemed to anyone looking in from the outside. His mansion stood proudly on the hills of San Francisco, overlooking the bay, an architectural masterpiece that symbolized wealth and success. But to Nathan, it was just an empty shell. No amount of marble floors, glass walls, or rare artwork could fill the void left by his daughter, Sarah. Sarah had been Nathan's entire world. He remembered her as a bright-eyed girl with an infectious laugh, her curiosity boundless. He remembered her dreams, the ones they'd talk about late at night when she was supposed to be asleep. She wanted to travel, to change the world, and he had sworn to give her the best of everything. But when Sarah was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive illness, everything crumbled. He threw his fortune at the best doctors, experimental treatments, anything that offered a glimmer of hope. Despite all his efforts, Sarah's condition only worsened, slipping through his fingers no matter how hard he tried to hold on. She was gone by the time she was 12, leaving him with nothing but memories and an unbearable weight of guilt. After Sarah's death, Nathan's wife, Amanda, had left him. He couldn't blame her. He had shut her out during their daughter's final months, consumed by a single-minded desperation to save Sarah. They grew apart, and one night, without a word, Amanda packed her things and left. Nathan had accepted her departure as his punishment. Now, years later, he lived in solitude, a quiet figure on the city's social scene, his philanthropy recognized by many but understood by few. To him, it was just a way to give the life he had failed to give Sarah. That night, as he walked through the rain-slicked streets of San Francisco, he replayed the scenes of Sarah's last days in his mind. He saw her face, her smile fading, and he clenched his fists, his heart tightening with each step. He walked aimlessly, letting the rain soak through his coat, hoping the downpour might wash away some of his pain. In the faint glow of a streetlight, a figure caught his eye, a girl, no older than 10, sitting alone on a bench, huddled against the cold. Her posture struck him, something hauntingly familiar. His heart skipped a beat as he approached her, his eyes narrowing in the dim light. The girl looked up, and Nathan felt the ground slip away beneath him. She was the mirror image of Sarah, down to the dimple on her cheek and the delicate arch of her brows. He blinked, certain his mind was playing tricks, but the girl was real, her big eyes studying him cautiously. "Are you all right?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. She didn't respond at first, just stared at him with an intensity that sent chills through him. Then, finally, she whispered, "My mom told me. You left us? That's why she brought me here." Nathan's mind reeled as he stood before the girl who looked so hauntingly like Sarah. For a moment, he questioned his own sanity. The same deep brown eyes, the same slight tilt of her head, even her shy, uncertain expression mirrored Sarah's. He could hardly breathe. What did you say?" he stammered, his heart pounding. The girl shifted nervously, her small hands clutching the edges of her worn coat, trying to pull it tighter around her. She was clearly cold, and it pained Nathan to see her shivering there. Her gaze dropped to the wet pavement as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said you left us. That's why I'm here," she repeated. The words laced with a sadness and vulnerability that twisted something inside him. Nathan swallowed hard, his mind racing with questions. Who was this girl? How could she know him? And why did she look so much like Sarah? He took a tentative step forward, hoping not to scare her away, and forced himself to keep his voice steady. "Who is your mother?" he asked, careful not to sound as desperate as he felt. "Why did she bring you here? Alone?" The girl hesitated, glancing up at him before looking away, as if she was afraid to answer. After a long pause, she finally whispered, she said, "She said you didn't want us anymore. That you left." Nathan felt a surge of confusion and anger. Left? He had never left anyone. Amanda had been the one who left him. Why would anyone tell this child that he abandoned them? Trying to push his frustration aside, he knelt down to her level, hoping to get a better look at her face. The rain dripped from his hair, blurring his vision, but he could see her shivering as she stared down at her shoes. He had to know more. His mind demanded answers, even though he feared what they might mean. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone softer now, gentler. The girl's shoulders tightened, and she glanced at him with a guarded expression. After a long pause, she murmured, "Lily." The name sent a chill down his spine. Lily. He remembered Amanda mentioning that name once. Back when they were still grieving Sarah, she had wanted another child, and they had tentatively talked about adoption. They'd never pursued it, at least, not together. Nathan shook his head, dismissing the memory, but his heart was now pounding faster, as if some invisible force was tightening its grip. "Lily, where is your mother now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer, but he needed to know. The girl hesitated, biting her lip. She said she had to go. She told me to wait here, that you would find me." Her voice cracked as she said it, and her small shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. "She told me if you cared, you'd come." Nathan's heart twisted painfully. He couldn't begin to fathom what was happening. Why would Amanda leave this child here? Why would she manipulate Lily into thinking he had left them? Every fiber of his being wanted to protect her, but he still needed answers, needed to make sense of this impossible situation. He took off his coat and draped it gently over Lily's shoulders, hoping to ease her shivering. "Listen, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what your mother told you, but I promise you, I've never left you." The words felt hollow. He didn't even know this child, but there was something unshakable within him that told him he couldn't let her go. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both fear and a glimmer of hope. She seemed to study his face for a moment, as if searching for some hidden truth in his expression. "Can we go somewhere warm?" she asked timidly, her voice quivering. Nathan nodded, his own heart breaking as he looked at the fragile girl before him. "Of course, Lily. We'll go somewhere warm, and you can tell me everything. Everything you know." Gently, he took her small, cold hand in his, and together they walked through the rain-soaked streets, Lily's quiet steps matching his own hesitant pace. The questions mounted in his mind, growing heavier with each step they took. Who was this girl really? And why did she look so much like Sarah? As they reached a small cafe glowing with warm light, Nathan's resolve hardened. No matter how twisted this mystery was, he was going to uncover the truth. The cafe was nearly empty, its dim lighting and the quiet murmur of voices offering a welcome escape from the rain and the strange turmoil in Nathan's mind. He led Lily inside, glancing at her shivering frame as they stepped out of the cold. She looked so fragile, yet there was something in her gaze, a quiet resilience, almost a guardedness, that made him wonder what she had been through. They settled into a booth by the window, and Nathan watched as she wrapped her hands around the mug of hot chocolate the server brought, her fingers still shaking. He couldn't help but notice how tired she looked, as if she hadn't slept in days. It stirred an instinct in him that he hadn't felt in years, an urge to protect her, to shield her from whatever nightmare had brought her here. Nathan took a deep breath and forced himself to speak, hoping his voice would steady both their nerves. "Lily," he began gently, "I know this is hard, but I need to understand. Why did your mother bring you here tonight? Why did she leave you like that?" The girl took a long sip of her hot chocolate, her gaze distant, her small frame hunched. After a few moments, she looked up, her eyes shadowed. "She told me that you left us," she whispered, repeating the words she had said in the rain, though now with a bit more clarity. "She said you didn't want us in your life anymore." Her voice cracked, and she bit her lip, as if trying to keep herself from saying more. Nathan's chest tightened. The accusation in those words struck deeper than he could bear, and he searched her face, desperate for any clue that might explain how Amanda could have told her such a thing. None of this made any sense, but he held his tone as gentle as he could, careful not to frighten her. "I know this is confusing, but I promise, Lily, I've never left anyone. I didn't even know you existed, until tonight." His voice softened. "Do you understand that?" She nodded, though she looked doubtful, and then her gaze shifted to the window, where the rain trickled down the glass. She said you'd come back when you missed us," she murmured. "She said if I was patient, you'd come." There was something hauntingly hollow about her words. Nathan felt a strange, bitter chill settle over him, as if Amanda's voice was echoing through Lily's, haunting him. He wondered if Amanda had somehow filled this girl's head with ideas and expectations, all while keeping her locked away, waiting, without any real intention of coming back for her. "Lily," he said softly, "I know it's hard to understand, but I need you to tell me everything you remember about your mom, about your life. It's really important." He hesitated before adding, "I promise you, I just want to help." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze as unreadable as it was vulnerable. Finally, she sighed and started speaking, her voice wavering at first, then growing steadier as she went on. "We lived in a small apartment," she began. "Mom was always tired. She was always working, and when she'd come home, she'd talk about you." She paused, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as though she were reliving the memories. "She'd say how you didn't care about us anymore, how you'd moved on and left us behind. She'd say you had to focus on the things that were more important to you." Nathan clenched his fists under the table. Amanda's words, or rather, her poison, had seeped into this girl's heart, leaving her feeling abandoned, rejected by someone she didn't even know. But why? Why would Amanda go to such lengths to isolate Lily, to fill her mind with these stories? "When did she tell you to wait for me?" he asked quietly, though the question trembled on his lips. Lily shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tracing patterns on the mug. "Last week," she said, almost in a whisper. "She told me that it was time, that you'd come for me if I waited in the right place." The weight of her words settled heavily on Nathan's shoulders. Amanda had planned this. Whatever her intentions, she had set this night into motion, orchestrated it as deliberately as if it were some twisted play. "And what happened after that?" he asked, though a part of him feared the answer. She hesitated, then looked down at the table. "We came here together tonight, but she didn't stay. She brought me to the park, told me to sit there, and said you'd come. Then she left. I don't know where she went." Nathan's heart twisted painfully. He felt a surge of anger toward Amanda, but he kept it buried, not wanting to alarm Lily. He had no idea what could drive someone to abandon their own child, to manipulate her into believing these lies. He had to stay calm, for Lily's sake. "Listen, Lily," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I want to help you. You're safe with me, okay? No one's going to leave you alone again." His voice wavered as he reached out and placed a reassuring hand on hers. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away, her fingers cold and delicate under his. She looked at him then, really looked at him, with a vulnerability that cut straight to his soul. "But why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would you want to help me if you didn't want us before?" Nathan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her that none of it was true, that he would never have abandoned her if he had known she existed. But how could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? "Because none of this is your fault," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't do anything wrong, Lily. Whatever your mom told you, you're not alone. Not anymore." For the first time since they had met, Lily's expression softened. She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him, as though searching for something she had long ago stopped believing in: trust, maybe even hope. As they sat there, the rain continued to pour outside, drumming steadily against the window. The questions in Nathan's mind multiplied, filling him with a sense of urgency. Amanda was out there somewhere, with secrets he needed to uncover, and Lily, this child who was somehow tied to his own tragic past, was at the center of it all. He didn't know what the next steps would be, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let this girl slip away. The night deepened as Nathan and Lily sat in the warm, quiet cafe, surrounded by empty tables and the soft glow of old-fashioned lamps. Outside, the rain continued to beat down, a steady rhythm that echoed the uncertainty building in Nathan's mind. His thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and dread, yet beneath it all was a fierce determination. He wasn't going to let Lily out of his sight. Not now. When they had finished their drinks, Nathan paid the bill and led her outside, holding an umbrella over them as they walked to his car. Lily stayed silent, clinging to his coat, her face half hidden by her wet hair. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be all right, but he knew how hollow that would sound. He didn't have the answers yet, and he couldn't promise her a future he didn't fully understand. The drive to his house was tense. Nathan cast a few glances at Lily in the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window, her expression unreadable, but her small hands gripped the seatbelt tightly. The streets were nearly empty, their headlights casting ghostly shadows on the wet pavement. Nathan's mind raced, thinking through the events of the night, trying to piece together Amanda's intentions. He had too many questions, and they haunted him at every turn. Finally, they arrived at his home. Nathan glanced up at the sprawling mansion, its tall, dark windows and grand, silent halls, and felt a pang of doubt. This place hadn't seen the warmth of a family in years. It was nothing but stone and silence, a monument to his own isolation. How could it possibly feel welcoming to a scared child? As they stepped inside, the lights flickered on, illuminating the grand staircase and the paintings that lined the walls. The house was immaculate, every surface polished to a shine, but Lily's eyes darted around, unsure and guarded. She shifted her feet as though she felt out of place, and Nathan noticed how small she seemed, dwarfed by the towering ceiling and cold marble floors. "You don't have to be scared," he said softly, forcing a gentle smile. "This place is quiet, I know, but you're safe here." She gave a small nod but remained silent, her gaze still lingering on the shadows that crept along the edges of the room. He led her down a hallway and into a cozy sitting room. This was the one room he kept warm and lived in. It was where he spent most of his time. A fire flickered in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the plush armchairs and the faded rug. "Why don't you sit down?" he suggested. "I'll be right back." Lily hesitated before finally sinking into one of the armchairs, her gaze still wary. Nathan left her there for a moment and went to the kitchen. He brewed a cup of chamomile tea, hoping it might help soothe her, and grabbed a plate of crackers and cheese. As he returned to the sitting room, he noticed she had wrapped herself up in the coat he'd given her, looking so small and fragile against the oversized chair. "Here," he said, handing her the tea. "It'll help you warm up." She took the cup with both hands, murmuring a quiet thank you, and sipped the tea cautiously. Nathan sat in the chair across from her, trying to find the right words. His eyes searched her face, looking for any signs that she might be opening up, but her expression was closed, guarded, as if she were bracing herself for whatever came next. "Lily, I know this is a lot," he began gently, choosing his words carefully. "And I know you probably don't trust me yet, but is there anything more you can tell me about your mother? Anything at all?" She looked down, her gaze distant, as though she were lost in a memory. After a moment, she whispered, "She used to talk about you sometimes, when she was tired or angry. She'd say things about you, about how you didn't want us." Nathan's chest tightened, an ache spreading through him. He wanted to reach out, to tell her that none of this was her fault, that he'd never known she existed. But he held back, letting her speak at her own pace. Sometimes she'd say you were sorry and that you'd come back. But other times, her voice trailed off and she glanced up at him, her eyes filled with an uncertain sadness. Other times, she'd say you'd forgotten about us. She was different on those days. Nathan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. Amanda must have been torn, struggling with her own feelings, trapped between love and resentment, and using Lily as the conduit for all her confusion. He hated the thought of Amanda filling Lily's head with such painful ideas, of twisting the truth to fit whatever emotional turmoil she was experiencing. "What about the last few days?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Did she say anything before she brought you here?" Lily's expression darkened, and she stared down into her cup of tea, her fingers tracing the rim of the mug. "She was strange, quiet. She told me that you'd finally realized we needed you. She said I needed to be patient, to just wait until you came." Nathan felt a chill run through him. Amanda had planned this night, arranged for Lily to be found in the park, left alone in the rain. It wasn't an accident. Amanda had wanted him to find her. But why? What kind of twisted scheme was she playing at? Did she say where she was going? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Or if she was coming back? Lily shook her head slowly, her shoulders slumping. No, she just left. She didn't say anything else. She looked up at him, her gaze filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Do you think she's coming back?" Nathan hesitated, struggling to find the right response. He didn't want to give her false hope, but he didn't want to add to her fear either. He forced himself to meet her gaze, offering her the only reassurance he could. "I don't know, Lily," he said quietly, "but I promise you're not alone. I'm here, and I'll make sure you're safe. Whatever happens, I won't let you go." Her expression softened, and for a brief moment, she seemed to relax, her grip on the tea loosening. Nathan felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire. He could see her eyelids growing heavy, exhaustion finally taking hold as the warmth of the room and the security of his presence settled around her. "Lily," he said softly, leaning forward, "I think it's time for you to get some rest. We can talk more in the morning." She nodded sleepily, setting the mug aside as she stifled a yawn. He led her up the stairs, guiding her to a guest bedroom at the end of the hall. The room was simple, with soft white bedding and a window that overlooked the dark gardens below. He pulled back the covers and motioned for her to lie down. As she climbed into bed, Nathan tucked the blankets around her, his heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and protectiveness. She looked up at him, her eyes half closed, and murmured, "Thank you." "You're welcome, Lily," he replied softly. "Sleep well." He turned off the light and stepped out of the room, pulling the door closed until only a small crack of light remained. Nathan stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at that thin line of light, lost in thought. Amanda's actions made no sense, and the questions in his mind felt like an endless, unsolvable maze. But he knew one thing for sure. Whatever secrets Amanda was hiding, he would find them, for Lily's sake and for his own. The morning sun crept through the windows, casting a gentle glow over the quiet mansion. Nathan sat in the kitchen, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands as he stared at the swirling steam, his mind still tangled with thoughts from the night before. Lily's words had haunted his sleep, fragments of Amanda's manipulation and bitterness circling his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything about this situation was more complicated than it seemed. He had spent hours in restless contemplation, replaying his last few years with Amanda, scrutinizing every conversation, every small detail, searching for any hint that could explain her sudden return to his life through Lily. The idea that Amanda could leave her own daughter out in the rain, feeding her lies to make her think she was unwanted, was almost too cruel to comprehend. And yet, here Lily was, real and fragile, living proof of Amanda's actions. A soft creak broke his thoughts, and he looked up to see Lily standing hesitantly at the doorway. She looked so small, her shoulders hunched slightly, her eyes still carrying the shadows of last night's uncertainty. Nathan set down his coffee and managed a gentle smile, trying to put her at ease. "Good morning, Lily," he said, his voice calm. "Did you sleep all right?" She nodded, though her eyes darted around the room, as if she were still adjusting to the strange surroundings. "It was good," she murmured softly, glancing down at her feet. "Come, have some breakfast," Nathan offered, gesturing to the table where he had set out some toast, scrambled eggs, and fruit. "I didn't know what you'd like, so I just made a little bit of everything." Lily sat down across from him, eyeing the food uncertainly before reaching for a piece of toast. She took small, careful bites, eating quietly. Nathan observed her, his heart aching at the cautious way she moved, like she was used to bracing herself for the worst. He wanted so badly to ask her more questions, to try and piece together the truth, but he knew he had to be patient. After a few minutes, he decided to start slowly, hoping to get her to open up a little. "Lily," he began gently, "I know we talked a bit last night, but I was wondering if you could tell me more about how things were with your mom. Maybe even little things, like where you went to school, or if you had any friends." She looked up, chewing thoughtfully, as if weighing whether she should answer. After a long pause, she spoke. "I didn't really have friends," she admitted, her voice low. "We moved around a lot. I'd start to make friends, but then we'd have to leave." Nathan felt a pang of sympathy. He could only imagine how lonely that life must have been for her, constantly uprooted, unable to find stability. "That sounds difficult," he said softly. It must have been hard to leave so often. She nodded, her gaze dropping back down to her plate. Mom always said we had to. She said it was because of you, that you wanted us to be hidden. His heart clenched at the accusation, though he kept his expression steady. Did she tell you why? He asked gently. Lily shrugged, her eyes distant, as though sifting through old memories. She'd just say you were ashamed of us, that you'd moved on, but didn't want people to know about me. Her voice faltered, and for a moment, she looked like she was fighting back tears. Nathan felt an overwhelming wave of anger toward Amanda. How could she plant such cruel ideas in Lily's mind? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. The last thing he wanted was to scare Lily or make her feel like she'd done something wrong by sharing her story. Lily, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I need you to know that none of that is true. I didn't even know about you. If I had known, I would have been there for you. I promise you that. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of doubt and a faint glimmer of hope. Why would she say all that, then? She asked, her voice trembling. Nathan shook his head slowly, wishing he had an answer that would make sense. I don't know, he admitted. I wish I understood her reasons. But what I do know is that you didn't deserve any of that. And none of it was your fault. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air between them. Nathan wanted to reach across the table, to somehow reassure her that she wasn't alone, that she wasn't unwanted. But he sensed that words alone couldn't erase the damage Amanda had done. As they finished breakfast, a thought occurred to him. A small hope that maybe he could get some answers elsewhere. He had an old friend, Mark, who had once been a detective before starting his own private investigation firm. Mark had helped Nathan in the past with legal matters and had connections that might prove useful. Nathan realized he'd need more than just words to make sense of what was happening. Lily, he said, breaking the silence as he cleared their plates. There's someone I'd like to talk to about all this. A friend of mine who can help us understand what's going on. Would that be all right with you? She looked at him, hesitating for a moment before nodding. Okay, she murmured. Nathan gave her a reassuring smile, hoping to ease any lingering fears she might have. He's a good man, someone I trust. We won't do anything without your permission, all right? I just think he might be able to help us find some answers. After breakfast, Nathan stepped into his office and picked up the phone, dialing Mark's number. As it rang, he glanced toward the hallway, where Lily had retreated to explore the house. He could hear her quiet footsteps echoing down the hall, a faint reminder that this situation was as real as it was unexpected. The phone clicked, and Mark's voice came through the line, gruff but friendly. Nathan, it's been a while. To what do I owe the pleasure? Mark, I need your help, Nathan replied, his voice tense with urgency. Something complicated has come up. I don't want to get into it over the phone, but can you come by? I need someone I can trust. There was a pause on the other end before Mark replied, his tone serious. Of course. I'll be there in an hour. Nathan hung up, feeling a small sense of relief. He knew Mark's background, his expertise, and his dedication to his work. If anyone could help him unravel this mess, it was Mark. As he waited, he found Lily standing by a large window in the sitting room, staring out into the sprawling gardens beyond. She looked lost in thought, her small frame framed by the soft light streaming in through the glass. Nathan walked over to her, his footsteps quiet on the hardwood floor. What are you thinking about? He asked gently. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. I just wonder where she went, why she left me. The sadness in her voice struck Nathan deeply, and he wished he had a comforting answer. But he knew he couldn't offer her empty promises. Instead, he put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll find out together. I promise. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Nathan glanced at Lily. That'll be my friend, Mark, he said, his tone warm and encouraging. He's here to help us, all right? She nodded, though she looked anxious, fidgeting with the sleeve of her shirt. Nathan gave her an encouraging smile before heading to the door. When he opened it, he found Mark standing there, his expression serious but compassionate. They shook hands, and Nathan quickly filled him in on the events of the past day. Mark's brow furrowed as he listened, nodding thoughtfully. This doesn't sound like a simple case of abandonment, he murmured. There's something more here, Nathan. I can look into records, maybe see if Amanda's left any trail, but we'll need to be careful. Nathan nodded, grateful for Mark's support. Anything you can find will help. Together, they walked back to the sitting room, where Lily sat quietly on the couch, her eyes wide as she looked up at Mark. Mark gave her a kind smile and introduced himself, his tone warm and reassuring, careful not to make her feel uneasy. As they sat down, Nathan felt a renewed determination settling over him. Whatever Amanda's reasons, whatever twisted path had led them to this moment, he was going to uncover the truth. For Lily's sake and his own, he needed to understand the secrets that had kept them apart and what it might mean for the future. Mark settled into the armchair across from Lily, his calm and steady gaze assessing her with a kind but professional curiosity. He leaned forward, hands clasped together, and spoke in a warm, reassuring tone. Lily, I know this must be really strange and overwhelming for you, but I'm here to help you and Nathan understand everything, so that maybe things can start to feel a little less confusing. He glanced over at Nathan, who gave him a nod of encouragement. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions? Only answer what you feel comfortable with. Lily looked at Mark, her expression wary but softening a bit. She gave a small nod, though her hands twisted nervously in her lap. Mark smiled, a gesture of quiet reassurance. Thank you, he said gently. Now, I know you've told Nathan a little bit about your mom and how you got here, but do you remember anything else? Maybe something about where you and your mom were living, or if there was anyone else around. Lily's face clouded with thought. She looked down, her gaze distant as if she were sifting through her memories, piecing together details that were blurred by the turmoil of the past few days. We moved around a lot, she said, almost to herself. It was always just me and Mom. Sometimes she would talk to people on the phone, people I didn't know. She'd tell me to stay in my room when she did. She hesitated, glancing at Nathan and then back at Mark. Sometimes she'd sound mad or sad. I think she was afraid of something. Nathan's heart sank at her words, but he kept his face calm, not wanting to add to her distress. Mark nodded thoughtfully, his brow furrowing slightly. Did she ever mention what she was afraid of? He asked gently. Lily shook her head slowly, her expression thoughtful and uncertain. No, she didn't talk to me about that stuff. She only said that we had to be careful, that we couldn't trust anyone. She looked up at Nathan, her eyes filled with a flicker of doubt. She said we couldn't even trust you. Nathan's chest tightened, and he felt a pang of guilt, though he knew it wasn't his fault. He wished he could explain to Lily how much he wanted to be there for her, but he didn't want to press her. He could feel Mark's careful gaze on him, a reminder to keep his emotions in check. Mark continued gently. Did she ever mention any names? Anyone she was close to, or anyone she was worried about? Lily's brow furrowed, and she seemed to struggle to recall, her small fingers picking nervously at the edge of her sleeve. Once, she murmured, her voice barely audible. She mentioned a name, Victor. She didn't say much, just that he was the reason we had to hide. Nathan and Mark exchanged a look. The name sent a shiver down Nathan's spine, a name from his past that he had long buried. Victor had been a business associate, a powerful man with influence and money. Years ago, he and Nathan had clashed over a series of investments, an encounter that had left bitter tension between them. But that was ages ago, something he'd almost forgotten about. Could Victor have somehow been involved in Amanda's decision to hide? Victor, Nathan muttered, more to himself than to anyone in the room. Mark picked up on his unease, his gaze sharpening. You know him? Nathan nodded, his thoughts racing. Yes, he was an old acquaintance, but I hadn't thought about him in years. We parted ways after a business disagreement. He looked down, struggling to make sense of it all. I can't see why he'd have anything to do with Amanda or Lily. Mark pursed his lips, his gaze thoughtful. It's possible Amanda felt threatened, or maybe she was caught up in something connected to Victor. People like him, they don't just disappear quietly. They find ways to keep their influence alive, even if it means hurting others. Lily's expression grew fearful, and she hugged her arms around herself, her gaze dropping back down to the floor. Did he hurt my mom? She whispered. her voice small and trembling. Nathan's heart broke at her words, and he reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I don't know, Lily," he said gently, "but I promise you, we'll find out. And you're safe now. No one is going to hurt you here." She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of hope and doubt. He could see the battle within her, a young girl struggling to trust someone for the first time, to believe that someone genuinely cared for her. He squeezed her shoulder gently, offering what little comfort he could. Mark cleared his throat, his tone shifting slightly. "Nathan, I think I need to look into Victor, just to see if there's any connection. If he's still active or has any associates who might know something about Amanda." Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. "Do whatever it takes. I don't care about the cost, Mark. I just want to know the truth." Mark gave a short nod, his gaze steady and understanding. "I'll get started right away. But Nathan, I have to warn you. If Victor is involved in any way, this may be bigger than we think. He's not someone to underestimate." Nathan felt a chill run through him, but he pushed the fear aside. "I understand. Just, please, let me know the moment you find anything." Mark stood up, giving Lily a gentle smile before heading toward the door. "You take care, Lily. I'll do my best to help you and Nathan figure this out." With a reassuring nod to Nathan, he left, his footsteps fading down the hall. The silence that settled after Mark's departure was heavy, almost oppressive. Nathan sat back down, his gaze fixed on Lily, who was still clutching her arms, her small form tense and withdrawn. He wished he could take away her fears, erase the doubts that Amanda had planted in her mind, but he knew it would take time and patience. "Lily," he said softly, breaking the silence, "I know this is all really confusing, and I can only imagine how hard it's been for you. But I need you to know that you're not alone anymore. I'm here for you, no matter what." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with a vulnerability that tore at his heart. What if he comes for us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Nathan leaned forward, meeting her gaze with a steady resolve. "Then he'll have to go through me," he said firmly. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." For the first time, a small flicker of relief seemed to wash over her. She took a shaky breath, her hands slowly unclenching as she absorbed his words. They sat there for a while in silence, the only sound the distant ticking of the clock on the wall, a reminder that time was slipping by as they waited for answers. Eventually, Lily's eyelids began to droop, the exhaustion from the stress and uncertainty finally taking its toll. Nathan noticed and gently urged her to go upstairs and get some rest. She nodded, rising slowly and giving him a small, hesitant smile before heading down the hall to her room. Once she was gone, Nathan sat alone in the sitting room, his thoughts dark and troubled. He replayed the name Victor in his mind, feeling the weight of old memories and grudges that he had thought long buried. The possibility that someone from his past could have influenced Amanda's actions disturbed him deeply. He couldn't shake the image of Amanda, once so vibrant and determined, spiraling into fear and paranoia. What had happened to make her leave her daughter alone, with nothing but lies and distrust? The doorbell rang, jolting him from his thoughts. He stood up, his mind racing, half hoping it might be Mark with an early update, but he knew that was unlikely. He crossed the room, opened the door, and found himself face to face with a delivery man holding a small envelope. "Mr. Cole?" the man asked, handing him the envelope. "This came for you. No return address." Nathan's brow furrowed as he took the envelope, feeling a strange sense of unease. He thanked the delivery man and shut the door, staring down at the plain, unmarked envelope in his hands. The paper was thick, almost formal, and the envelope had a faint smell of something familiar, a cologne he had once known, long ago. He walked back into the sitting room and carefully tore open the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with a short message typed in an unassuming font. The words were simple, but they sent a cold shiver down his spine. "Stay away from the past if you want a future with her." Nathan's hands shook as he held the letter. His thoughts spiraled, a sense of dread tightening around him. Someone knew about Lily. Someone knew about his connection to Amanda, his search for answers, and was warning him to stop. But Nathan knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whoever had sent this letter, whether it was Victor or someone else, they had made a grave mistake. If they thought a veiled threat could keep him from protecting Lily, they didn't know him at all. With a renewed sense of determination, Nathan carefully folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. He wasn't going to let this threat scare him away. Whatever secrets lay hidden in his past, he was going to uncover them. For Lily's sake and for his own, he would find out the truth. The hours stretched into the late afternoon, and Nathan sat in his study, the letter still echoing in his mind, its words imprinted on him like a warning. Outside, the sky was turning dark with thick clouds, casting long shadows through the windows. The mansion seemed to absorb the gloom, its quiet halls and empty rooms amplifying his unease. He was torn between the instinct to protect Lily and the gnawing fear that any move he made could draw the very danger he wanted to keep her safe from. Nathan turned to the window, watching the storm clouds gather, the air heavy with anticipation. He had already alerted Mark to the letter, hoping his friend could trace its origin or find a clue that might help him untangle this web of fear and mystery. But waiting wasn't easy. Mark was thorough and cautious, and Nathan knew it might take him hours, even days, to turn up any leads. A quiet knock at the door broke his thoughts, and he turned to see Lily standing hesitantly in the doorway, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Nathan gave her a reassuring nod, gesturing for her to enter. She walked slowly into the room, her gaze drifting around the study, taking in the shelves lined with books, the heavy oak desk, and the dim light that softened the space. "Is this where you work?" she asked, her fingers tracing the edge of the desk. "Yes," he replied with a small smile. "When I'm working from home. Though lately, well, I've had other things on my mind." Lily looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. She seemed to be weighing her words carefully before she finally spoke. I don't understand why my mom didn't just tell me the truth about you." She paused, her eyes clouding with confusion. "I don't understand why she left me at all." Nathan's heart ached as he heard the tremor in her voice. He wished he could give her the answers she needed, but he was as much in the dark as she was. Taking a deep breath, he motioned for her to sit down on the armchair across from his. "Lily," he began gently, leaning forward so she could see the sincerity in his eyes, "I don't understand everything yet either, but I promise you, whatever reason she had, we'll find out. You deserve the truth." She held his gaze, the weight of her sadness evident in the way her shoulders drooped, as if she were carrying the burden of years of unanswered questions. I want to know if she's okay," she murmured. "Even after everything, I still miss her." The innocence of her words cut through Nathan like a knife. Despite all the pain Amanda had caused her, Lily still longed for her mother's love, still wanted to believe there was something worth salvaging in their relationship. Nathan wished he could give her that peace, but he knew that until they found Amanda, all he could offer was his support. "You're stronger than you know, Lily," he said softly. "I know it's hard, but whatever we find, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." She gave him a small, tentative smile, one that wavered but held a glimmer of hope. It was the first true smile he had seen from her, and he felt a swell of relief at the sight. Just then, his phone buzzed on the desk, the sudden noise startling both of them. He glanced down and saw Mark's name flashing on the screen. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, standing and answering the call. "Nathan," Mark's voice came through, low and tense. "I think I found something. It's a bit strange." Nathan's pulse quickened. "What is it?" "I did some digging, looking into Victor and anyone connected to him," Mark said. "Turns out he's been involved in some shady dealings over the years, but nothing concrete that ties him to Amanda, until recently. About a month ago, a woman matching Amanda's description visited one of his properties under an alias." Nathan felt a chill. Did anyone see her? Is she still in contact with him? "Possibly," Mark replied, "but it gets stranger. There's evidence to suggest she's been working with Victor on something. I found records showing transactions in her name, payments coming in regularly. I don't know what they're for yet, but it's significant." Nathan clenched his fist, a surge of anger rising in him. "So she's been taking money from him? For what?" Why leave her daughter in the middle of all this? I can't say for sure, Mark said carefully, but it's possible she's entangled in something dangerous, something she can't walk away from. Whatever it is, it might be why she left Lily with you. Maybe she thought it was the only way to keep her safe. Nathan's mind spun with the implications. If Amanda was tied up in Victor's world, it was no wonder she had been so paranoid, so secretive. But he couldn't ignore the betrayal he felt, the anger that she had let Lily suffer, isolated and confused, while she involved herself with someone like Victor. Can you find out more? He asked, his voice strained. I'll keep digging, Mark promised. But Nathan, if Victor is involved, be careful. He's dangerous, and if he realizes you're looking into him, he won't hesitate to protect his interests. Nathan thanked him, hung up, and leaned against the desk, processing the flood of emotions swirling inside him. He looked up to see Lily watching him, her expression worried. She had heard enough of the conversation to know something was wrong. Was that about my mom? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan knelt down beside her, his gaze steady and reassuring. Yes, it was. Mark thinks she might be involved with someone from my past, someone dangerous. But we're going to find out the truth. And no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Lily's face was a mixture of fear and relief, her small hands clenching and unclenching as she absorbed his words. Do you think she'll come back for me? Nathan hesitated, searching for the right answer. He didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep, but he wanted to give her some measure of comfort. I don't know, he admitted honestly, but I do know that you're safe here with me. I'll do everything I can to protect you. She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the floor as if she were lost in thought. Thank you, she murmured, her voice small but sincere. It was the first time she had openly expressed her gratitude, and Nathan felt a surge of warmth, a quiet hope that maybe he was starting to break through the walls she had built around herself. As the hours passed, the storm outside finally broke, lightning flashing in the sky, followed by the distant rumble of thunder. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, lashing against the windows. Nathan and Lily sat in the living room, watching the storm in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Just as the evening descended into darkness, the doorbell rang, shattering the quiet. Nathan's heart pounded as he stood up, exchanging a wary glance with Lily before walking to the door. He opened it cautiously, his breath catching as he saw the figure standing in the rain, drenched and shivering. It was Amanda. She looked nothing like the woman he remembered. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes soaked through, and her eyes wild with desperation. She glanced over his shoulder, her gaze searching the room before finally meeting his. Nathan, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please let me in. I need to talk to you. For a moment, Nathan simply stared, a mixture of shock, anger, and relief swirling inside him. He glanced back at Lily, who had risen from her seat, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Amanda, he murmured, his voice barely audible. He stepped aside, allowing her to enter, though every instinct warned him to keep his guard up. Amanda walked into the foyer, her footsteps heavy, leaving small puddles on the polished floor. She looked at Lily, her face softening, a mixture of guilt and something unreadable in her gaze. Lily, she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. I'm sorry. Lily took a step back, her face a mixture of confusion and hurt. She stared at her mother, the woman who had filled her with promises and left her alone in the rain, and for the first time, Nathan saw the anger brewing beneath her sadness. Amanda turned to Nathan, her face etched with fear and desperation. Please, Nathan, I know you're angry, but I had no choice. I had to protect her. Nathan's voice was hard, filled with barely contained fury. Protect her? By abandoning her? By feeding her lies about me? Amanda flinched, her gaze dropping to the floor. You don't understand. I didn't want to leave her, but I didn't have a choice. Victor. He threatened to hurt her if I didn't do what he wanted. A cold dread filled the room as her words hung in the air. Nathan looked at her, his anger mingling with a deep, unsettling fear. What does Victor want? He demanded, his voice low. Amanda looked up, her eyes filled with a haunted desperation. "He wants you, Nathan. He wants revenge, and he's willing to use her to get it." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a dark, suffocating cloud. Nathan felt the walls closing in, his mind racing with the realization that Victor had been pulling the strings all along, that this was only the beginning of a twisted game he had no choice but to play. And at the center of it all was Lily, a pawn in a dangerous game that threatened to unravel everything he held dear. Nathan clenched his fists, a new resolve hardening within him. Whatever it took, he would not let Victor win. He would protect Lily, uncover the truth, and face whatever came his way. The tension in the room was thick as Nathan stared at Amanda, trying to process her words. His pulse pounded in his ears, every instinct warning him that they were on dangerous ground. He took a steadying breath, glancing at Lily, who was watching her mother with a mix of confusion, anger, and longing. This was the woman who had both protected her and betrayed her, and Nathan could see the storm of emotions swirling in Lily's eyes. Nathan turned back to Amanda, his gaze hard. "You need to explain, Amanda. All of it. What does Victor want from me? And why did you think abandoning Lily was protecting her?" Amanda's shoulders slumped as she looked down, seemingly defeated. She glanced at Lily, her face softening with guilt, before taking a seat on the edge of a chair, as if her strength had suddenly given out. She sighed, running a shaky hand through her damp hair, and began to speak. "Victor. He was involved in something dangerous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was all business at first, years ago. He was your associate, but he had his own agenda, things he never told you about." She looked up, her gaze distant, as if reliving memories she'd rather forget. At some point, he crossed a line. Smuggling, illegal trades, people who didn't care about the rules. Nathan's stomach churned. He had always suspected Victor's dealings were shady, but he hadn't known the full extent. Their partnership had ended when Nathan refused to support a dubious project, but he had never expected it to come back to haunt him in such a personal way. Amanda continued, her voice trembling. "He blamed you for the failure of his plans, Nathan. He thought you betrayed him, cost him millions, ruined his reputation. But it wasn't just money. He lost influence, connections, and he vowed to get even with you, to make you suffer." She took a deep breath, casting a pained glance at Lily. "I only found out about his plans by accident, and by then, I was already tangled in his web." Nathan's anger flared. "And so you let him use Lily? You let him manipulate her, tear her life apart?" Amanda flinched, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't know what else to do. Victor had people watching me, and he threatened to hurt her if I didn't keep her away from you. He wanted you isolated, vulnerable. So I lied to Lily. I told her you didn't care, that you'd left us. It was the only way I could keep her hidden." Lily's face twisted with hurt and disbelief. "You made me feel like I was nothing to him, like he didn't want me." Her voice was small, barely holding back tears. "All that time, I thought he had forgotten about us." Amanda reached out a trembling hand toward her, but Lily took a step back, crossing her arms over her chest. The pain in her eyes was raw, and Nathan felt his own heart break as he watched her struggle to reconcile the mother she thought she knew with the truth. "I know you're angry," Amanda whispered, her voice breaking, "but I thought if I could keep you safe, it would be worth it. That one day when it was safe, I'd be able to explain everything." She turned back to Nathan, her expression pleading. But things changed. Victor wanted more than just revenge. He wanted to see you broken. Nathan's fists clenched as he processed her words. "So you just abandoned her in the rain, left her alone and scared, with only lies to guide her?" His voice was tight with restrained fury. "What kind of mother does that?" Amanda's eyes darkened with sorrow. "A desperate one," she replied. "You don't understand, Nathan. I knew he was closing in. The threats were getting worse. I thought maybe if I left her with you, you could keep her safe, that Victor wouldn't be able to reach her if she was in your care." Nathan could feel his anger simmering beneath the surface, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate threat. Victor's reach was vast, and if Amanda was telling the truth, Lily's safety was far from guaranteed. "What does Victor want now?" he asked, his tone steely. What does he expect from you? Or from me? Amanda's gaze dropped to the floor. He wants you vulnerable, alone. He wants you to lose everything. Your reputation, your business, your family. And he won't stop until he's made sure you know what it feels like to be stripped of everything. The words hung in the air, filling the room with a chilling silence. Nathan's mind raced, considering every possible angle. He knew that if Victor was truly as ruthless as Amanda claimed, then the people around him, his friends, his colleagues, even Lily, were in danger. Nathan's voice softened as he looked at Lily. I know this isn't easy to hear, but I won't let him hurt you, he said firmly, kneeling down to look her in the eyes. Whatever Victor is planning, we'll face it together. You're safe here, and I'll do everything I can to protect you. Lily looked back at him, her face a mixture of fear and trust. She nodded slowly, her small hand reaching out to hold his, her fingers trembling. For the first time, he could feel a fragile bond forming between them, a trust born from the shared understanding of danger and betrayal. Amanda cleared her throat, breaking the moment. There's something else, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Victor gave me one last ultimatum. I was supposed to draw you out, make you leave Lily alone, unprotected. He wants her as leverage, Nathan, and he knows that if anything happens to her, it will destroy you. Nathan's chest tightened. The idea of Victor using Lily to manipulate him was infuriating, and the thought that Amanda had been part of that plan, even reluctantly, filled him with a cold rage. So what's his next move? Nathan demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Amanda shook her head, her face pale. I don't know exactly. He keeps things vague, only gives me enough information to keep me under control. But I know he's planning something soon. I was supposed to leave you vulnerable, make it easy for him. Nathan's gaze hardened. He could see now that Victor's plan went far beyond revenge. It was a carefully crafted scheme designed to isolate him, to take away everyone he cared about and everything he had worked for, all to satisfy a twisted vendetta. But Nathan wasn't about to play by Victor's rules. He looked at Amanda, his expression determined. If we're going to stop him, we need to be one step ahead. No more secrets, no more lies. We do this together. Amanda nodded, her face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. I'll tell you everything I know. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Lily. I didn't know who else to turn to. Nathan watched her carefully, his trust in her still fragile. He couldn't forget the pain she had caused Lily, the lies she had fed her to protect her own skin. But he knew that right now, she was the only link he had to Victor's plans. They spent the next hour mapping out what Amanda knew, piecing together every fragment of information she had gathered over the years. She told him about the people Victor had in his pocket, his methods of intimidation, the way he used fear and control to keep his enemies in line. It was a dark, twisted world, and Nathan could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. When they finally finished, Nathan took a deep breath, looking at both Amanda and Lily. We're going to need help. Victor's network is too strong, and we can't do this alone. Amanda nodded. I know a few people who might be able to help. People who are tired of Victor's influence. People who want to see him stopped. Good, Nathan replied, his voice resolute. Because we're done running. Whatever he has planned, we're going to face it head on. Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with a newfound courage, her small hand reaching out to hold his. Nathan squeezed her hand gently, feeling the warmth of her trust, her quiet resilience. She had been through so much, and yet here she was, standing strong beside him. As they prepared for the days ahead, Nathan felt a strange sense of purpose settling over him. He was no longer the man who had once built walls around himself, keeping the world at a distance. Now, with Lily beside him, he was ready to face whatever came, to protect her at any cost. The storm outside had subsided, the night now calm and quiet. But Nathan knew the real storm was yet to come. The morning dawned cold and gray, casting a dim light over the mansion as Nathan sat in the kitchen, his mind already racing with the plans they had made the night before. Every detail was critical, every step had to be calculated. Victor was out there, watching, waiting, and Nathan knew that one wrong move could put them all in danger. Amanda was seated across from him, nursing a cup of coffee, her face pale and lined with exhaustion. The toll of years spent under Victor's shadow was etched in her expression, but today there was something else too, a determination that hadn't been there before, a hint of the woman she'd once been. For the first time, it felt like they were united, forced together by the shared goal of keeping Lily safe. Lily sat quietly at the kitchen table, picking at her breakfast, her gaze flickering between her parents with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. She was still coming to terms with the whirlwind of revelations, the bitter truths that had shattered her world. Nathan could see the uncertainty in her eyes, but he was also struck by her resilience. She was stronger than anyone had given her credit for. As they ate in silence, a faint knock on the door broke the quiet. Nathan and Amanda exchanged a quick, tense glance. Mark had agreed to come by early to go over their next steps, but Nathan hadn't expected him this soon. "I'll get it," he said, standing up and walking toward the front door, every muscle in his body tense with anticipation. He opened the door and found Mark standing there, his face grim, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced with a sense of urgency. Nathan motioned him inside, and they walked together to the sitting room, where Amanda and Lily soon joined them, their expressions wary. Mark took a seat, his gaze steady as he looked at Nathan. "We need to talk about what I found," he said, his tone low. "It's worse than we thought." Nathan's heart sank, but he forced himself to listen, to absorb every detail. "Go on." Mark glanced at Amanda, a flicker of sympathy in his gaze before he continued. "Victor's reach is deeper than I initially realized. He has contacts everywhere, law enforcement, business associates, even in social services. Anyone who might have questioned his activities has either been silenced or brought under his control." He paused, his gaze shifting to Lily, as if debating how much he should reveal in front of her. Nathan noticed the hesitation and placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, giving her a reassuring nod. "Lily deserves to know. She's part of this, whether we like it or not." Mark sighed, nodding. "All right, here's the thing. Victor's ultimate goal isn't just to ruin you, Nathan. It's to make you suffer in the most personal way possible. He wants to dismantle everything you care about, everyone you love, and he'll stop at nothing to achieve it." Amanda's face paled, and Lily looked down, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Nathan clenched his fists, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He had known Victor was ruthless, but the lengths he was willing to go to, the darkness that consumed him, was beyond anything Nathan had imagined. "What's his next move?" Nathan asked, his voice tight. Mark hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder, placing it on the coffee table in front of them. "I managed to get my hands on some documents, payments, lists of properties, things that Victor has been involved in recently. It looks like he's setting up something big, something that involves laundering money through fake businesses. And there's a name that keeps coming up in connection with his dealings." Nathan leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "What name?" "Evergreen Children's Foundation," Mark replied, his voice laced with disgust. "It's supposed to be a charitable organization, a cover for his operations. He's using it to launder money and hide his assets. But that's not all. He's trafficking vulnerable kids through this organization, using them as leverage, pawns to manipulate and control his enemies." Nathan felt a wave of nausea as he processed the horrific implications of Mark's words. It wasn't just about him anymore. Victor was exploiting innocent lives, taking advantage of those who had no one to protect them. The thought of Lily being drawn into this dark web of manipulation and violence filled him with rage. Amanda's voice broke the silence, her tone filled with disbelief. "So that's what he wanted all along? To use our daughter as some kind of pawn?" Mark nodded grimly. "I think he saw Lily as the perfect tool to get to Nathan. He knew that if he could turn her against him, it would be the ultimate punishment." He looked at Nathan, his gaze steely. "Victor wants you to feel powerless, Nathan. To make you think you can't protect the people you love." Nathan's jaw clenched, his resolve hardening. "Then he doesn't know me as well as he thinks," he replied, his voice filled with quiet fury. "I won't let him get away with this. We need to stop him, and we need to bring down his entire operation." Mark nodded, a glint of approval in his eyes. "I thought you'd say that." I've already started contacting a few people, journalists, lawyers, people who aren't afraid to dig into Victor's dealings. If we can expose his activities, we might be able to dismantle his network from the outside." Amanda looked up, her face a mixture of fear and determination. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her gaze. "If there's anything I can do to help, tell me." Mark considered her offer, then nodded. "Actually, there is something. You know Victor better than anyone here. If you're willing to share everything you know, every name, every meeting, every threat, it could help us connect the dots, paint a clearer picture of his network." Amanda nodded, her face resolute. "I'll tell you everything." For the next hour, they pored over the information Mark had gathered, piecing together a plan, their determination growing with each new revelation. Nathan could feel a sense of purpose crystallizing within him. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring that Victor could never hurt anyone else the way he had hurt their family. As they finished laying out the details, a soft voice broke the silence. "What happens to me?" Lily asked, her gaze flickering from Nathan to Amanda, her expression uncertain. Nathan knelt beside her, looking into her eyes, his tone gentle but firm. "You'll be with me, Lily. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. I promise." Lily's face softened, her small hand reaching out to grip his, her trust clear despite the fear lingering in her eyes. Nathan felt a wave of relief wash over him, a fierce determination to honor his promise, to shield her from the darkness that had haunted their lives for so long. Mark stood, gathering his papers, his face set with grim resolve. "I'll start moving on this immediately. The sooner we can get the word out, the better our chances." Nathan nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation and resolve. "Thank you, Mark, for everything." Mark gave him a reassuring smile. "You do the same for me, Nathan." With a final nod, he left, leaving the three of them alone in the quiet house. As the door clicked shut, Nathan felt a strange calm settle over him. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, he could see a way forward, a path that might lead them out of the darkness. Amanda turned to him, her expression tentative. "Nathan, I know I can never make up for the pain I caused, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. For everything." He looked at her, the weight of years of betrayal and pain lingering between them. He wanted to forgive her, to let go of the anger that had haunted him for so long. But he also knew that trust would take time, that wounds like theirs didn't heal overnight. "I believe you're sorry, Amanda," he said quietly, "but we both have a lot to answer for. Maybe one day, maybe we can find some peace. But right now, all that matters is keeping Lily safe." Amanda nodded, accepting his words with quiet understanding. She looked over at Lily, her eyes filled with regret and love, as if hoping that one day, her daughter might forgive her too. As night fell, the three of them settled into the quiet of the house, the weight of the upcoming battle pressing down on them. But there was a new strength between them now, a fragile alliance born of necessity and shared purpose. Nathan glanced over at Lily, who had curled up on the couch beside him, her head resting on his shoulder as she drifted into sleep. He looked down at her, feeling a deep, unshakable resolve. She was his responsibility now, his reason to fight. As he watched her sleep, Nathan felt a surge of hope, a promise to himself that, no matter what it took, he would keep her safe. The days that followed were tense, filled with a flurry of activity as Nathan, Amanda, and Mark put their plan into motion. Every step was deliberate, every move calculated. They coordinated with Mark's contacts, gathering allies who were willing to expose Victor's operation and dismantle his network. Nathan knew they only had one chance to strike. They had to make it count. As the plan progressed, Nathan noticed small changes in Lily. She was quiet, often keeping to herself, but there was a hint of strength in her eyes, a flicker of resilience that had grown since she'd come into his care. She was carrying the weight of the truth, but she was also beginning to trust him. They shared quiet moments together, talking, playing chess, or just sitting in comfortable silence. For Nathan, each moment was precious, a reminder of what he was fighting for. One evening, as the plan neared its final stage, Nathan found Lily sitting alone by the window, watching the darkened sky. He joined her, feeling the cool glass beneath his hand as he looked out over the grounds. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan thought for a moment before answering. "A little," he admitted, "but I'm more focused than afraid. I know what we're up against, and I know what's at stake." He turned to look at her, his gaze soft. "You're what's at stake, Lily, and I won't let anything happen to you." She looked down, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she whispered, her voice laced with determination. "I want to feel safe again." Nathan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You will be. I promise." The night of the final phase arrived, and they moved quickly, coordinating with Mark's team. Amanda had already given her full testimony, detailing every aspect of Victor's operation, every name she could remember. Armed with this information, Mark had been able to secure enough evidence to go public, to expose Victor and his entire network. But they knew Victor wouldn't go down without a fight. They had taken extra precautions, laying traps to ensure he couldn't escape or retaliate. Hours passed in tense silence as they awaited word from Mark. The house felt charged with anticipation, every shadow seeming to hold a threat. Nathan sat in the living room with Amanda and Lily. The three of them bonded by a shared sense of purpose, each waiting for the resolution that had felt so out of reach. Finally, close to midnight, the phone rang. Nathan answered, and Mark's voice crackled over the line, filled with relief and satisfaction. "It's over, Nathan. We've got him. Victor's operation is in shambles, and he's in custody. The authorities have everything they need." Nathan closed his eyes, a wave of relief washing over him. "Thank you, Mark, for everything." "You do the same for me," Mark replied warmly. "Take care of yourself, Nathan, and take care of her." When he hung up, he looked at Amanda and Lily, his expression one of quiet triumph. "It's done. Victor's in custody. He can't hurt us anymore." Amanda's shoulders sagged as she let out a shaky breath, the weight of years of fear and guilt finally lifting. Lily's face broke into a hesitant smile, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of relief and disbelief. She glanced at her mother, then at Nathan, her gaze filled with gratitude and something deeper, a tentative trust. Over the next few days, as the dust settled, Nathan found himself finally able to breathe, to imagine a life without the shadow of danger looming over them. Lily stayed close to him, often seeking his presence, as if reassuring herself that this new stability was real. They took long walks around the property, spending quiet afternoons talking, learning about each other. Nathan cherished each moment, feeling a bond form that was stronger than blood. One evening, as they walked through the gardens, Lily turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Will you always be here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan stopped, looking down at her, his gaze filled with warmth. "Yes, Lily, I'll always be here for you, no matter what." She gave him a small, shy smile, her trust in him finally complete. And for Nathan, that simple smile was worth every hardship, every risk he had taken. Amanda approached him later that night, her face reflecting a newfound peace, though her eyes held a hint of sadness. "Thank you, Nathan," she said quietly, "for everything you've done for her, for us." Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "She deserves a chance at a real life, Amanda. A life filled with honesty and stability." Amanda looked down, her hands clasped tightly. "I don't know if she'll ever truly forgive me," she whispered, "but I hope someday she'll understand." Nathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Give her time. She's stronger than we realize." In the weeks that followed, they established a new routine. Nathan and Lily became inseparable, the mansion finally feeling like a home. They cooked meals together, took trips into town, shared stories, and built a life grounded in trust and warmth. Amanda, though present, seemed to understand the bond between Nathan and Lily, giving them the space to grow and heal. She was patient, doing her best to show Lily that she was committed to making amends. One day, as they sat in the garden under the warm afternoon sun, Lily looked up at Nathan, her face bright with a genuine smile. "I want to call you Dad," she said, her voice filled with shy excitement. "If that's okay." Nathan's heart swelled, his eyes filling with tears he didn't bother to hide. He reached out, pulling her into a tight embrace, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course, Lily. Nothing would make me happier." In that moment, he knew he had found his purpose, his family. They were no longer bound by tragedy or fear, but by a love that had grown from the darkest circumstances, a love that had endured. As they sat together, the world around them felt calm and still. A future opened before them.